It's another edition of PENSDOWN. Here we talk to journalists to get to understand what they go through in their bid to bring us the news. The journalism journeys of all those people that gather, process, and deliver the news to you in the comfort of wherever you consume it. That is what we do here. Today, I've had the privilege of being joined by a senior journalist who is based in the United Kingdom. He's a Nigerian and has done a lot in the field of journalism and media generally. Femi Okutubo is a media practitioner, entrepreneur, administrator, and diaspora community leader. He has lived in the United Kingdom since 1989, where he has excelled as a media professional. He is the founder, publisher, and editor-in-chief of Trumpet Media Group. With no formal journalism training, Okutubo, who holds a BSc in economics from Ogun State University in Nigeria and an MSc in economics from the University of London, cut his teeth in the profession through campus journalism and as a freelance contributor to Nigerian Tribune, Daily Times, and the Guardian newspapers in the 1980s. At Ogun State University, he served as one of two student members of the university's press council, set up by its senate to regulate the practice of campus journalism. In 1989, he won the Best Campus Journalist Award, instituted by the Association of Campus Journalists. Barely a year after his arrival in the UK, that is in 1990, he started contributing to the now defunct Nigeria Home News, established by veteran journalist and columnist Tunde Fagbenle. Dissatisfied with the regular negative reporting and stereotyping of Nigeria by the British mainstream media, he established the Nigerian Trumpet newspaper in 1995. He was and still is of the strong view that if we as a nation, continent, and its diaspora do not blow our own trumpets, nobody else will do it for us. This informed his publication's name, Trumpets. Having realized that the negative reporting and stereotyping was not peculiar to the Nigerian diaspora community, he expanded his publication's coverage and its target audience to include the entire diaspora African community and rebranded as the Trumpet in 1998. The Trumpet is the longest surviving African media outlet, print and electronic, in the UK, and has been a strong campaigning force for the promotion of the positive image of Africa and Africans. Okutubo is recognized as an innovator and leading player in UK's Black, Asian, and minority ethnic media industry. The Trumpet is the first free national Black newspaper in Britain and one of the first free UK national newspapers, blazing the trail as a freebie even before the start of UK's highest circulating newspaper, the Metro, which was established in 1999. The Trumpet made headline news in the UK industry when in 2001, it became Britain's largest circulating and audit Bureau of Circulation's audited Black newspaper in the UK. The media entrepreneur has grown his media empire by expanding beyond print media into electronic media, online, social media, and events under the banner of Trumpet Media Group. The group includes Trumpet Lifestyle Magazine, the digital edition of the Trumpet, that is www.trumpetmediagroup.com, Trumpet Newsbreaker, that is an email newsletter, Trumpet Ogun, Trumpet Ghana, Trumpet Kenya, Trumpet Sierra Leone, just to mention a few. In his quest to defend and enhance the Africa brand, he founded the Gathering of Africa's Best Awards in 1999. To date, Over 300 sons, daughters, and friends of Africa have bagged GAB awards, including late former President Nelson Mandela, the late Professor Thomas Adioye Lambo, Patti Bolaye Kolomsi, Paralympics medalist Ade Adepiton, and Fatima Bio, now Sierra Leone's First Lady, only to mention a few. He is very passionate about Africa and is a regular contributor on media platforms like Ben TV, Vox Africa, Yanga TV, Press TV, Channels TV, TVC News, Colorful Radio, and Choice FM. He has also appeared on the BBC News and London Live Television. He is married to Lola, and the union is blessed with 4 children. Mr. Femi Okutubo is my guest. Thank you very much, sir, for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sir, you said you started journalism from the university campus. How did you discover the journalist in you while on campus?
Um, I think even before I got into university,
Okay.
I was already writing. So, for example, I had the opportunity of actually um, sending like a letter
Okay.
to the then Daily Times, which is which was Nigeria's largest circulating newspaper at the time, and it was nice to see one's article published or one's letter reality, I think I actually contributed to like a complaints column, like an ombudsman kind of
Okay.
column, where
Mm,
I had a grudge, so to speak, against
mm,
the company, and to now get the newspaper be able to actually investigate it and publish the results. I think that was a bit of a motivation
mm,
about the power of the media, and then subsequently, I was freelancing for a number of newspapers, writing opinion articles, and to actually see that those things were published,
mm,
obviously, was an incentive and a motivation that, oh, indeed, it means that at least what one is being read, what one is writing is of interest.
mm,
And so it was only natural that when one went into both polytechnic and university, that one continued along those lines,
mm.
continue writing, and as you say, probably practice what then. Well, what I'm not sure whether I would have classified it as journalism at that time, but at least at least that's where we started from.
Mm. I am really excited by the motivation that brought the trumpet into being. You wanted to neutralize the bad press that Nigerians particularly were suffering in the United Kingdom. With that at your back and with your desire to set up a platform to tell the Nigerian story the Nigerian way, did you face any challenges with registration, getting of vendors, supplies, and other things? Because you also are a Nigerian and you carry the baggage or the, the negative image which had been portrayed through the media. What was that period like for you?
I must say that it was probably a little bit of a challenging time, but I would say that because one also had some confidence that one was on the right track,
Mm,
because I felt that we were, fighting a just cause,
mm,
because I was 100% sure that many of the negative stories that were being published were not really truly representative of who we are as a people.
mm,
I felt quite confident to forge ahead. Now, that is not to say there were not challenges, not necessarily in terms of registration with the authorities, but more to do with perhaps things like the logistics, things
mm,
like pricing, things like trying to distribution, in terms
mm,
of trying to actually get it into shops, and so on. All those areas were really, really challenging. So it wasn't really common for you, for example, to find newspapers or African publications, so to speak, within
mm,
mainstream media outlets. It
mm,
just was not common. So
mm,
trying to sort of get into that line was, and in fact, till one point, was something that we couldn't really achieve in the sense that we wanted it to. And
mm.
what we then had to do was actually have to come up with our own distribution network.
Okay.
Because, for example, if you're going to go into, say, for example, major distributors like WH Smith and Menzies here in the
Mm,
United Kingdom,
mm,
there's a minimum revenue that they're expecting to be able to generate from your publication,
okay.
on a monthly basis. That time, the Sun newspaper was usually maybe about 30p, which means that 30p times 30 days means about £9 revenue per copy for
Mm,
WH Smith or any distributor for that matter. On
mm,
occasion, I think we were selling at one point we were 50p, then we went up to £1, went up to 75p. So there was no time where our price was more than £1, and we were only publishing once a month, and we
okay.
didn't necessarily have the volume, in terms of number of copies compared to, say, for example, the Sun that was probably selling in millions, in early millions, compared to us that we were selling in thousands. So we were just not attractive commercially to
Mm,
mainstream distributors, and that meant that we actually had to sort of set up our own distribution network. That
mm,
had its own challenges as well, because the same cost that it would take to send one copy or 10 copies to an outlet is probably the same cost it would take to send 1,000 copies to the same outlet. So when you
mm,
really look at it from the commercial angle or from the business perspective, this it was a struggle to actually get the figures to stack up. And
mm,
then another challenge is that when you go into outlets and you actually let's assume you took 10 copies there and they managed to sell 10 copies. That's £10. Now, if and out of that £10, you've got to sort of give them a percentage. So we might be lucky to be able to of that revenue £6. Now, if
mm,
you go to that shop and unfortunately the shopkeeper is not there and it's only their boy or girl that's actually there who's
mm,
not able to give you money, it means that you actually have to pay a second trip to try and go and collect money. So before you know it, you're probably spending as much as £6 or if not more trying to go
mm,
and collect £6. So all those little things were part of the challenges that we faced,
mm,
and it was one of the reasons why we decided to actually become a free publication, to sort
mm.
of take out some of those logistical problems, and then focus more on advertising and sponsorship as our source of revenue.
I am interested in the immediate target audience. How was their reception like when the paper came out eventually?
We came out when it came out. I think it was. I would say it was with mixed feelings. So
Mm,
you had people who were happy to see yet another publication. And it was at a time where the internet wasn't really a major source of news, especially Nigerian news at the time.
mm,
In fact, you had situations where there were few from Nigeria into the UK
mm,
once a week. So people would probably go to major areas like Brixton. In fact, there was a particular spot in Brixton where people would go to, or in Stratford, where they would go to try and get their news. And I think this was also in the middle of a major political crisis in Nigeria. So we
mm,
had a situation where Chief Mike Abiola,
mm,
the winner of the presidential elections, was denied
mm,
his the opportunity to take up office, and he was being detained. We were
mm,
under a military junta, and so
mm,
people were really, really eager to sort of know what was going on back home in Nigeria. So I would say that the majority of people, accepted it, but at the same time, you would have a few skeptics who feel that, well, can anything, probably people that were not even interested in hearing about Nigeria, people that felt that maybe because of the circumstances under which they left the country. Maybe people just left out of frustration and had vowed that once they got here, they didn't want to have anything to do with the country Nigeria. But I would say that majority and generally speaking, the publication was well accepted. And then with the kind of stories that we were projecting with the editorial policy, it was actually a welcome relief to actually read stories, positive stories about Nigerians in the UK.
At a point, you rebranded and extended the coverage to the African diaspora. I mean, ensuring that continent wide, you were trying to do the rebranding and repositioning as against the bad press, which was being suffered by the whole continent from the mainstream media. Was there an incident or series of incidents or reports that triggered the decision to expand your coverage?
There were a number of reasons why we actually decided to expand that coverage. So
Mm,
one of them was that, particularly from a business commercial perspective, you'll be surprised at that time that you probably go to a potential advertiser, especially like a mainstream advertiser, and they'll be asking you that, oh, where is Nigeria? Oh, is that in Ghana? Or is that in South Africa? Or some ridiculous questions. So
that's right.
from the commercial perspective, it made more sense to
Mm,
present Africa to the audience, to a potential advertiser, especially mainstream, rather than individual country of Nigeria. But also beyond that, what we also discovered was that the same challenges that Nigerians were facing were similar to the challenges that other nationals of the continent were also facing. And I would say that what we discovered is that unfortunately, because you have different countries with different sizes, and that,
mm,
at that time, the majority of Africans in the UK were Nigerians. Even I would probably say that even at one point, you could almost say that out of every 10 Africans, or black Africans at least 6 or 7 would be Nigerians. So what that meant was that it wasn't necessarily viable
mm,
for other countries or other nationals to actually have their own publications.
mm.
And so it made a lot of sense, even in the spirit of the big brother attitude, which Nigeria has always trended to display on the continent, um, that we try to bring others together, and
Mm,
come together under one roof. And that's how we rebranded from Nigerian Trumpet to the Trumpet.
mm. When you look back, it's been some 30 years plus since this your desire to challenge the narrative was rolled out in the form of a publication. When you look back, what are some of the successes you can say that your media outfit from the very day the first publication came out has been able to achieve?
I would say, looking back over those years and looking at today, I would
Mm,
say that Africans are now treated with a lot more respect. Africans can hold their head high in various fields of endeavor. There have been we've been out, if you like a forerunner and a gateway to other media outlets. So
mm,
not just in terms of print, but also in terms of electronic. We have quite a number of publications that have come and gone. We have quite a number of media outlets, TV, radio, and so on that have come and gone. And so generally today, the African in the UK is actually treated with a lot more respect. People see us in terms of what we are able to do rather than the color of our skin. And I think, and beyond that, I think we've also been able to develop a generation of people.
mm,
There's a younger generation of Africans that are now coming who are actually more steadfast, more who have stamped their feet much more within the country, United Kingdom. And don't be surprised that maybe in a few years' time, you might have an African prime minister in Great Britain. And I would say that directly or indirectly, we've contributed to achieving that.
mm. You are a British Nigerian, am I right?
You're correct, yeah.
Um, So, with this last statement you made, that maybe one day we might see a prime minister of Great Britain of African origin, are you harboring any such intentions?
No, I'm definitely not. I I'm definitely I'm not going to say I'm not into politics, but because
Mm,
if you ask me, every human being is actually a political animal and is therefore into politics. But I'm not into partisan politics, and
okay.
perhaps by the virtue of what I do, it's nice to be able to bring all sides of all shades of views and political views together.
Mm,
So it's one of the reasons why I'm not publicly active in politics.
mm,
Having said that, within me, obviously, I would have my own, sympathies. But the reality is that we need the publication to have an outlook that is very neutral, that is very liberal, that takes all positions on board. So the long and short answer to your question is that no, I don't have any plans to contest or find my way as as prime minister of Great Britain. But then you never can tell.
mm.
Miracles do happen.
Exactly, because I know of Donald Trump who had zero political experience, but ended up occupying about the most coveted seats on earth as the president of the United States. So the final part of your response actually works for me. Miracles do happen. So we
They do.
wait and see.
They do.
Sir, yourself personally, how long have you practiced journalism yourself personally?
um, I would say actively, or maybe the early 80s. So that's very close to 40 years, I would say.
Close to 40 years.
Yeah.
What has been the most difficult assignment you have had to cover?
Difficult assignments. Um, I recall a time, especially in the early days of the Trumpet newspaper,
Mm,
when we covered a story about where we actually highlighted a number of fraudsters
mm,
as in London, and obviously it was quite good because we had informants, or we had an informant among them, or someone who was
okay.
very close to their circle, who
Mm,
was giving us first-hand information. And so these guys were really taken aback by the fact that we're able to publish stories with such precision,
mm.
and we were almost becoming like a big threat to them. And so they actually made an attempt to sort of lure me to a restaurant in South London, where again, because I also had informants among them, where they actually had plans to sort of throw acid at me and all that stuff.
You are based in the UK, but I know you are very much in touch with home. There is a raging debate on this platform that journalists in Africa should be licensed. One of the arguments is that conditions of service for journalists is poor. When there is licensing, things can be much more formalized. Another one is also a case for responsibility in reportage, quality reportage. Then there's the other side, which also looks at licensing as a regime to try and weed out the quacks. The downside to it, which others hold very closely, is that with the kind of lust for dictatorship and autocracy on the continent, licensing journalists is just going to give all these politicians who have a reputation for mishandling and maltreating journalists yet another opportunity to censor the media. Where do you stand in this argument?
Um, that's a very, very good one, and that's a very, very thought-provoking one.
Mm.
I'm probably going to start answering that question, from towards the rear. And what I
Okay.
mean by that is that number one, I have been and I think I alluded to it in my answer to the previous question,
Mm.
that there's a problem in terms of the quality of journalism that is being practiced.
Mm.
But again, most of this is not necessarily coming from journalists in the real sense of the word.
Mm.
What you now have is that with social media, the fact that everybody can now set up a blog or
Mm.
set up an online publication, you have people that are not observing the basic tenets, the basic
Mm.
principles of the profession.
Mm.
Journalists hold a very, very powerful position, and it's a position that they must exercise with a lot of responsibility. Sadly, you find people who will just publish stories without cross-checking. Some people deliberately actually sit down and cook up stories and send it out there. And
Mm.
unfortunately, what tends to happen again is this copycat syndrome,
That's
where
right.
one online publication picks up a story, and 100 others just copy the same story word for word without
Mm.
necessarily checking. Now, I'm of the view, and I've expressed this quite a number of times, that as journalists ourselves, that we definitely need to find a way of self-regulating.
Okay.
If we avoid self-regulating, then we leave government with no choice than to want to sort of regulate us,
Mm.
which is where this issue of licensing comes in.
Mm.
Personally, if we go down the line of being regulated by government,
Mm.
it's going to be a step in the wrong direction. Because just like you rightly identified, government has a tendency to abuse such privileges and such opportunities,
That's right.
and the journalists or the media is meant to be the fourth estate of REM.
Mm.
So it's actually as independent as government, whether it's in terms of the executive or the legislature or the judiciary. So
Mm.
now having one other of those bodies having to regulate us is not going to be a step in the right direction.
Mm.
So the long and short of what I'm saying is that I believe that there needs to be some form of sanity put back into the industry. I
Mm.
believe that the media organizations, the Union of Journalists, and so on and so forth, are the ones who should be at the forefront of trying to return some sanity into
Mm.
the system. And
Mm.
we should have a situation where if we have people who are bringing the profession into disrepute, who are able to sort of call people to order. And you have that in quite a number of professions. So whether it's in terms of lawyers, whether it's in terms of medical doctors,
Yes. Yes.
once you err in your practice, you're
Mm.
actually called to order by your profession, and in some cases, one could be struck off. So that's the kind of regime that I think we need to put in place. Journalists regulating journalists rather than government regulating journalists.
Mm. If you've done almost 40 years, if we have to roll back the hands of time, some 45 years, would you still choose journalism for a profession?
I definitely would. It's something that I love. It's something that I have a passion for.
Mm.
It's sometimes and with due respect to women, I liken it to I liken it to a pregnant woman who carries a pregnancy for 9 months, you know, going through so much pain, and but once the baby is delivered after 9 months or thereabouts, the joy that comes onto such a mother has no bounds.
Yeah.
And so it is with journalism, in the sense that it has its own challenges, it has its own pains. It could be very pressurizing and so on. But each time one is able to come out, whether it's with the newspaper or whether it's in terms of the publication, and you can see that what you're doing is affecting the lives of people, it is influencing policy, it is influencing lives, it really brings a lot of joy. And so definitely it's a profession that I'll always choose.
Mm. You've dealt with newsmakers across two jurisdictions. By jurisdiction, I'm looking at Africa as one and the UK as another. What is the comparative situation like? In Africa, we have newsmakers who have a reputation of talking down journalists, making them feel inferior, and downright disrespecting them. I mean, sometimes all manner of things just to show contempt to journalists. What is the situation out there, and how do you compare the two situations?
In the United Kingdom, I would say that journalists are actually they're revered, they're feared
Mm,
sometimes, and they're treated with a lot more respect.
mm,
Back in Africa, I can I can relate to the description that you've given,
mm,
where sometimes yes, journalists are they're treated very shabbily.
mm.
But I think I wouldn't necessarily say I've experienced that,
Okay.
and I think it's important that as well that even journalists themselves also need to position themselves properly. Journalists need to be well dressed.
Mm,
They need to know their stuff. They need to run stories without expecting to have a brown envelope
mm,
at the end of it all.
mm,
And so, if one positions oneself, that is not to say that the challenges are not there. I
mm,
think part of it again is the fact that journalists are not, especially back in Africa, sometimes are not well paid. In fact, I know of some countries where journalists are actually employed on a freelance basis.
mm,
And in fact, all some journalists want is to be able to have an ID card showing that they are attached to a particular publication, and then they can go out and find a way of making their money. So all
mm.
those practices, if you have those practices in place, it is no doubt certain that you'll continue to have a situation where journalists are not treated with respect. But having said that, I think there's also a new generation of journalists, particularly those who are involved in investigative journalism. People who are probably even in there are certain industries that are really picking up. So whether it's in terms of entertainment or fashion or sport, where people are actually treated with some level of respect. But generally speaking, I believe that if we can eliminate those issues which are highlighted, especially in Africa, journalists would definitely be treated with a lot more respect.
The birth of social media redefined the frontiers of journalism. Today, you cannot really say this is a platform dedicated to print when you go online, because on that platform, let's say the Sun newspaper or the Trumpet media, you have in the story, there are video elements or voice elements incorporated to put the entire report into one piece as a way of evidencing the claims the newsmaker has made. How did your platform or your group navigate the terrain when social media started redefining journalism such that online presence became indispensable if you needed to remain relevant within the media space?
It's something that we definitely recognized in good time.
Oh, okay.
And that's why, for example, we rebranded from the Trumpet newspaper to
Mm,
Trumpet Media Group. And we recognized that there was a convergence between online, print, social media, and even live events. And
mm,
that's why we felt that we needed to look at media in the broadest sense of things. What we've also tried to do as well is, again, if you have limited resources, you are not necessarily able to do everything that you'd love to do. So you
mm,
have to sort of prioritize what you want to focus on, and also look for various other sources of actually trying to achieve what you need to achieve. So, as a typical example, let us assume we were running a story about, let me see, maybe the inauguration of Ghana's president.
mm,
And let's assume that our strong point was in terms of the writing side, in terms of
mm,
writing the story.
Mm.
Such a thing, such a story is not complete if you don't have a photograph, obviously. So we
That's
would have
right.
to rely on a photographer.
Mm.
Such a story is even better if you can actually get a video of that inauguration ceremony. Now, we know, for example, that there will be people that would have covered such a story, especially let's look in terms of maybe the YouTube side. So it's
Mm.
quite possible that State House in Accra might have a
Yes.
pool of
Mm-hmm.
videos, or they might have a YouTube channel where you can actually just get a link and curate that into your publication. And there's nothing wrong in doing that, because number one, as long as credit is given. Number two, as long as we're not taking a third party property and attributing it to be ours. In
Yes.
fact, in reality, what we're actually doing is even helping them to build a YouTube channel, because what we do then is we copy the link directly from their site. So even any count in terms of views still goes to that website. So
That's
what
right.
you have is a situation where everything is a win-win for
Mm.
everybody. And even in terms of the end user, in terms of the reader, they're actually getting a more qualitative, multimedia rich coverage or reportage of what's going on. And so that's just an example of the kind of ways in which we've tried to sort of bring all those things together. But we're looking at a situation in the near future where from time to time we will probably start having our own journalists who would also be producing potential TV content or video
Mm.
content for our readers. But
Mm.
all these things have to be done on a gradual basis.
Have you ever been approached with some favor or offer to water down the details of any report your platform was set to publish?
um I don't recall any.
Mm.
um I don't recall any. The closest to that might be a situation where we went to cover a court case, and
Okay.
I think one of the interested parties didn't want us to publish,
Mm.
and I think they sent feelers, but obviously they got a cold reception, and it didn't really go further than that.
Mm.
Um, Plus, again, it depends on how you present yourself and how people see you. I gave the example of what happens in parts of Africa where a journalist who is not well paid is probably more likely to fall into such a bait. So thank God we've not had that as an issue.
Mm. You are the arrowhead of a media empire. In the year 2020, COVID 19 brutally assaulted a number of establishments. How much of a ruin did it inflict on your organization, or how much of a success story did your organization make out of it? It depends on which one your story represents.
Um, COVID-19 was an experience. It
Mm.
was an experience, but for us as an organization, I think um, it was like an eye opener. Now, I've always believed, for example, in working remotely. So there was even a time where, even when we were maintaining an office somewhere in East London,
Mm.
I rarely had cost to go in there, and I was maintaining the office because of my team members. So, obviously, one of the things that COVID 19 brought was the fact that there was a lot more remote working. So, I think, and now, because I remember we even explained to a potential advertiser, they just felt that if you're working from home, it looks like maybe your outfit is not that big or whatever. But now you have the likes of Twitter, or is it Google, who have
Mm.
decided that a lot of their staff are going to be working from home. So
Mm.
that notion has changed, and I think that is something that is on the positive side. Aside from that, I would also say as well that we were able to get quite enough some advertising from government because there was a lot of messages that government needed to put across during the pandemic to
mm,
to individuals out there, and publications like ours benefited from those advertising. So I think in that respect it was something that was extremely useful and something that we benefited from. But generally speaking, what I see, and then look at, I think the fact that we now had to even develop things like, use more video conferencing. So if we wanted to go for an interview or wanted
mm.
to, wanted to have a meeting, unlike in the past where we'd have had to sort of, take a trip down either by car or by air or by train or whatever it might be. These days, a lot of those things can now be achieved online and effectively so via packages like Zoom and so on and so forth. So all those things I think have really changed the outlook of journalism. It's affected us positively as a business, and I think it's something that we're definitely even looking to take even a lot more forward in terms of taking the best advantages of it.
You are a media owner, but do you still personally consider yourself as a practicing journalist? If yes, how many more years do you want to travel before dropping your pen or bowing out?
Wow. I'm definitely still a practicing journalist because I still, although I wouldn't necessarily say that I go out that much. I do go out on a number of occasions. So from that perspective, I do practice. But because I'm also the editor, a lot of my work revolves around trying to edit what others are,
Mm,
what others have written.
yes.
But definitely, I'm still a practicing journalist. It's something, obviously, I'm at a point where I'm having to develop things a lot more further so that it can be less reliant on me, especially in terms of the day to day running of the publication, maybe in terms of the editorial side and so on and so forth. So all those things are in the pipeline. Now, whether when that now happens, whether that would now release a bit more time to me, which I will
Mm,
now want to devote into practicing journalism again
mm,
or more actively, is something that remains to be seen.
mm.
But I've held on to this for so long. It's something that I enjoy. It's something that I have a passion for, and I'm not 100% sure it's something that I would want to give up so easily, even if I become the chairman of the company or whatever it might be in some years to come. But who knows? Only God holds the key to the future.
That's right. Grateful for your time, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been exciting. It's been pens down. Journalism journeys, that's what we talk. They go through a lot behind the scenes. You get to hear the stories, you enjoy the sports, you enjoy the entertainment, you enjoy everything in between. But do you know what they go through? That is what this platform is dedicated to, telling you the behind the scenes stories that impact directly on the lives of journalists in their line of duty. I've had the honor today of having a conversation all the way from the United Kingdom with the owner of the Trumpet Media Group, Mr. Femi Okutubo. I'm honored to have you today. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and keep up the good work. Well done.
Right. We'll be back next time with another edition of PENSDOWN. Stay tuned.